In this video of the beginner's course for Amazon Sumerian, we're going to look at how to add VR or virtual reality capabilities to your scene. There are a few different steps and there are additional tutorials you can look at if you want a more step-by-step and a more clear, just written out description of how to do this. Those are available in the description of this video. We're going to walk through essentially 3 tutorials. First is how to add the VR capabilities. How do you then add teleportation capabilities, and then add the ability to grab objects using your controllers. So in this video, we are going to learn about adding VR, how to add teleportation, and how to add grabbing capabilities. So let's get started. Okay, I'm here in my scene, and one thing you may notice is that I did hide this video that you see over here, because I'm going to go ahead and stick with Preston as my guide on how to operate this scene, as to give instructions on how to play this training simulator. So I'm going to stick with Preston. But the first thing we want to do when we add VR is that we want to go to the Import Assets panel up here above the canvas. And we're going to look for this CoreVR asset pack you see right here. So I'm going to select that and then click Add. That asset pack will appear in the Assets panel in the bottom left-hand corner of our screen. And for this video and for this walkthrough, it's best to make sure that you're using these filter buttons up here above, because we're going to be grabbing a lot of things from this asset pack. And it's best if you can filter between entities and scripts and other things like that. So just get comfortable with that. All right, so actually I want to go back down. I want to add the VR camera rig entity. So if I filter down to entities, I see the VR camera rig and under the CoreVR asset pack. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my scene. All right, and it appears right there in the center. Remember, this is the very center of our scene, and that's where it appears. Now, I would like to face forward when I'm doing this, meaning right now, the way I have my camera or my VR rig set up is that I want to face forward this way, but right now it's facing to the left. So I'm going to just change. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees on the Y-axis. This is just my own preference. So it is facing forward. Now, one thing didn't mention, and I should mention now, make sure that you do have your, whatever VR rig you're using, whether it's a Vive or an Oculus, make sure you have that set up correctly. In this video, we're going to be using an Oculus Rift, so that's the same steps are going to be very similar for whatever rig you're using. And make sure you see, again, those tutorials that describe the differences and how to do that. And so, again, you can use a Vive. We're going to be using an Oculus just because that's the one that I have set up here in our studio. Okay, so I have it facing forward. Now there's a few things to notice. Down here on the floor, these are the controllers that can be tied with the different types of VR rigs. So for example, these, I'll try to get a good view. These ones I believe are for the Oculus. These are for the Vive. And these are for the Daydream, Google Daydream, and the Oculus Go. So you see 4 different controller types because there are possibly 4 different platforms that you could be using. And again, I'm using the Oculus, and so those are the controllers that will appear in my scene once we get this all set up. So that represents the controllers. This represents the headset. And so this is where if you see over here, this is representing the HMD, the head-mounted display. So when I put this on, that's roughly where my head is going to be. Now I'm probably a little bit taller than where this is placed, so I'm going to be slightly taller than that, but not by much. Okay, so a few other things. Let's go to our VR camera rig over here in our Entities panel. And the one thing I do want to select is the current VR camera rig checkbox. I want to make sure I check that. And that is all you need to do to add VR capabilities to your scene. So if I press play and hit this Enter VR button, we can actually view our scene in VR. However, we want to be able to move around a little bit in our scene. We also want to be able to grab the spheres to play this simulator. So we have a few more steps to go. I'm going to expand over here in the entities panel. I'm going to expand the VR camera rig. And you see tracker under that. And then we're going to go down. All right, so these are the different controller types. So the controller _D, that is for Daydream. Controller _O _ left, and then right. That is Oculus. Controller OG is for Oculus Go, and controller V, left and right, are both for the Vive. So we are going to be dealing with, because we have an Oculus, we're going to be dealing with the Oculus left and right. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is be able to add teleportation. Teleportation is the ability to have your controller and click somewhere within a scene, and usually have a target displayed, and then you will then appear in that location of your scene. So that's what we're going to do. So to do that, we select the controller O, and we have to add a script component to each of these controllers. Notice that when I select the left and the right, there's not a script component over here in the inspector panel. So to do that, we just add component, select script, and then we'll do that also for the right. Add component, select script. Now we need to go back to our assets panel down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and I need to find a script that comes in this asset pack to drop it on this drop script input for both of these controllers. So I'm going to filter down to scripts, and because I'm dealing with teleportation, I'm going to drag the teleport script over to the drop script input. So that is for the right controller. Now I need to do the same thing for the left. So I'm going to select the left controller in the entities panel, and then go back down to the assets panel and select the teleport script, and then drag it over to the drop script input. So notice now that for my controller Oculus left and right, I have a teleport script instance on both of these controllers. Notice it is moving back and forth. It's selecting two different controllers when I do that. All right. The next thing we need to do is we need to add a target entity. That is when you are, and we can see this when we're in VR. So when you pull the trigger, it's the thumb pad. When you select the thumb pad, it will give you a target, and you can put that target somewhere in your scene. Well, we need to have the object of that target. What does it look like? That's an actual entity or object itself. And so what we need to do is now filter down to entities in the teleport target. So this literally kind of looks like a target, like a dartboard type of target. And that's when you select the thumb pad, it'll appear somewhere in your scene, and you can place that where you want to move or teleport to within your scene. So that's what this is. Without this, you won't be able to you won't have a target viewable to know where you are going. So I do that for the Oculus left controller and the Oculus right. Grab the teleport target. And that's all you need to do to add teleportation to your scene. So right now, if we open up our scene, press play, and enter VR, we will be able to see within our scene. We will be in VR, and we can move around within the scene. However, we cannot yet use the simulator, as we don't have the grab capabilities enabled. So that's what we'll do next. It's pretty simple. We'll select controller Oculus left, filter back again to scripts, remember. So I mentioned using these filter buttons up here is really helpful. So we already added the teleport script. Now we just need to add the grab script to both controllers if you want to be able to grab with both controllers, which we do. So I do that for the Oculus left and the Oculus right. Use the grab script. And just so you know, the CoreVR has recently been updated. So in some older versions of the tutorials, there was a few more steps you needed to take for grabbing. But that's actually it. You don't need to do anything else for grab. So now we've done three things so far. We have added the VR asset pack. We have then enabled teleportation, so we can move around within our scene. You can always walk within your scene, but if you want to move larger distances, that go outside of your boundary box that you've created in the room and wherever you have your VR set up, you can teleport to that place within your scene. And then lastly, we can grab objects. And grab objects also includes touching objects like this play button. So remember, as we have in the past, we press play, and we can play this scene or the simulator in two different ways. We can move the buckets back and forth. But now we can enter our scene using VR. And instead of moving the buckets, we can pick up the spheres or the game ball itself and place it within the corresponding bucket. Now, one thing we want to do before we actually experiment with that is we want Preston to be looking at us. So right now we have it so that when we move this camera around, his eyes follow that camera, as we saw in another video. However, we want him to now look at the VR camera. So what we need to do is select Preston. Now, if you remember, the point of interest here, we added the default camera. Well, now, instead, we're going to grab under VR camera rig and then under tracker. At the very bottom of this family of entities, we have HMD camera. That's this right here. So we're going to grab that from the entities panel and drag that over to the target entity for point of interest under the host component that is attached to Preston. So now, when we are in VR, he will actually look at us, and it'll look like he'll actually keep our attention, and we'll be able to look at each other. It's pretty cool. Before we enter the scene, last thing I'd like to do is that I would like the speech behavior where Preston starts talking. I don't want to hear his speech right now because I just want to move on with this. We've already heard it a few times, so I'm just going to remove that behavior from Preston so that he won't do the speech. He will still be in the scene. He'll still be looking at us, and we'll still be able to see him, but we just don't need to hear that speech. So let's give this scene a shot. I'm going to press play. Let's press play, and then once the scene plays, I'm going to click the Enter VR button. Remember to make sure that your VR rig is set up. Notice he is looking down. That's because the headset currently is kind of down and to the left. So it's kind of right here in 3D space or in virtual space. So let's press play. I'm going to expand this. Okay, I'm set up. You see my controllers. Notice as I move, you can see Preston. He is following my headset as I move back and forth, with his eyes in his head. Now I have my controllers. I'm going to press play to get this going. Press play to start going, and then I can grab it and then drop it in the orange bucket. Get a point up there, get another orange ball. Drop it in the orange bucket. Get another point on the scoreboard. And that's how you add VR capabilities, including teleportation and grabbing capabilities to a scene in Amazon Sumerian. In the next video, we're just going to finish this course up by in the next video, we're going to show you how to both publish your scene and create a unique thumbnail for when you post that scene in different places online. You'll be able to actually see a quick preview of your scene. So we're going to show you how to do that in the next video. So I hope you join us. We'll see you there.